The Department of Labor does estimate that there are about 1 to 2 million children across the United States who are working illegally in some of these jobs. And what the New York Times revealed in a deep dive that they did recently was that there's an entire shadow workforce of mostly migrant children across industries in every state. And just for some examples, 12-year-olds working as roofers in Florida and Tennessee, 13-year-old girls washing hotel sheets in Virginia, 13-year-old boy in Michigan making auto parts on an overnight shift that went till 6:30 in the morning, 12-year-olds working for Hyundai subsidiaries in Alabama. All of these products that might say that they're made in the United States, which might make you think, oh, okay, they're not made in a third world country in a sweatshop because that's why we pay more for them. And then come to find out that, even here in the United States, they're using child labor and kids that are, for the large part have no ability to advocate for themselves, because of the fact that they're 12 and 13 years old. So they just might not even have the vocabulary to advocate for themselves, but also largely because they might be undocumented, they're far away from their families, and in many cases they don't even speak English. So how is a child in that position who's being forced into this position or risk deportation or some negative legal outcome? If the Department of Labor, and I know we went back to those statistics that said like there was 3,800 violations in 2022 or something like that. That just goes to show to me how underreported the problem is. Because if there's only 3,800 violations being reported to the Department of Labor in an entire year in a country of 300 something million people, that tells you that there's thousands and thousands, if not hundreds of thousands more cases that are not being reported. And a lot of these jobs are not places that most of the public would be familiar with. So, if it's meat processing plants, agriculture, out in fields in rural areas, these are places that like most of us on a day-to-day basis are never really encountering. So it's not like you're going to know if these kids are out there working. And the employers rely on that. They know that. I think the majority of the public is kind of blind to this and doesn't really want to know. And, these laws are quietly getting passed, like you talked about in Iowa, where some of the most archaic laws that they just passed, they do them in the quiet of the night. Like the one in Iowa, Senate File 542, that just allowed 14-year-olds, all these different changes, which we can talk about. That bill was passed at 4:52 in the morning in the legislature. So they were working deep into the night, making sure that, they waited till everybody was asleep and the media was not watching to pass this bill that will roll back child labor protections to the 1930s. So,
and just to push back a little bit on, because I feel like making the claim of the current evidence that we have is evidence of underreporting. I don't have anything specifically on that. I'm not sure if you do. So I don't want to necessarily go into that realm of, again, straw manning. I'll just say to that. But again, what we do have that we talked about earlier today was the effects that are leading, that we have the injury reports and we do have some death reports. Similarly to, again, like migrants, a lot of the cases of companies looking the other way is more so like bringing your child to work day. Because again, these are families that are typically lower income, and needing to rely on it and not being able to have those levels of education. And this is also something that has been addressed by the White House more recently as a growing issue. And I think that to then have, the White House is saying this is an issue, and then the GOP to say, oh, well, we shouldn't have an issue and we should actually make it easier. That is where my bigger concerns are. And that's where I tried to stay a little bit more grounded. But.
So let me talk about the bill a little bit in Iowa, because it would this is what is legally now allowed according to what the Senate passed there, which is that 14-year-olds can work 6-hour night shifts. 15-year-olds can perform light assembly work, whatever that means, moving items up to 50 pounds. 16 and 17-year-olds can serve alcohol if their parent or guardian signs a waiver. That to me was a very curious one, because I didn't know that there was such a desperate need for teenagers to be serving alcohol. But to me, I don't think about the risk of like the serving of the alcohol. To me, what would be the problem with that is, and because I work in the hospitality industry and I am around bartenders on a daily basis, I know that the biggest risk to a 16 or 17-year-old who's being asked to do that is not that they might consume alcohol. I think the risk is that they're going to be faced with a very aggressive or drunk customer who could wield a certain amount of power over them that they are not equipped to handle as a 16 or 17-year-old. And that's partly why the injury rates for child and youth workers are higher than they are for the general workforce, is because of their generally inexperienced. And so, they're more likely to have a problem or not know how to respond to a situation. And so all of these things are very troubling because, it's like these are laws that were passed 80 to 100 years ago that are now being readdressed. That should tell us how dire the labor shortage is, or just how much legislatures are willing to sacrifice to make these employers happy.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.